have someone waving over here. All right, great.
Because you're one for you. John's over there.
Got one.
Michael, somebody will
There's some more
accept
seats
you.
right there. So there's a seat over there. Look, right over there. Yeah, there's a good seat for that. All right. So this is a packed house, which is phenomenal. This is awesome. Again, I'm Chris Ortega, and I just wanted to say thank you everyone for being out here. I especially want to thank your committee members because they approached me and Pacific to say, hey, we want to have a reunion. So Bambi, where are you? We're going to have you all stand up. Jim, all right, Jim over here.
This is Bambi and Wendy's show. Nothing to do with it. They are the ones that are presenting all of you.
So next, let's go in and do Wendy.
Thank you.
And then one other person who was on all these calls doing a lot of this planning, John Oram, where? There we go, all right. Thank you so much. All right. So again, these four were instrumental. This would not be happening without them. I was lucky enough, they called me and they said, hey, we want to be on Pacific's campus. And I said, yes, let's get you in this beautiful alumni house. Let's get you into the Raymond Great Dining Hall and have some good times there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy right now and let her start off your lunch program. So, all right, one more round of applause.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Stay on the door a second. I want you to notice that he is not wearing a black suit with an orange shirt. He's wearing navy blue pants and vest and a dark red shirt. I'm going to introduce our speaker in just a moment, but I want to do a short plug. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. People have come from other states. You're just fabulous and wonderful, and we all love each other. David Bennett's going to be doing some videography throughout the rest of the course of the day, and eventually there will be something edited and available that Chris Henney can see in Belgium and Karen Larson can see in Minnesota, because you know that is a different country. And Pasha Newberry can see down in Costa Rica. So we'll reach out to our family in those other areas as well. After lunch, we have optional discussion groups. We have one with Harry Alley Walker from the first class, who's going to be talking about aging and growing up. And yeah, and it's not an organ recital. So she's going to be doing that. Gary Grossman, there you are, Gary. Gary is doing Introduction to the Modern World, except unlike Michael Wagner's, his is the 21st century world. And I think you'll be very interested in that. John Smith. Smith's going to lead a discussion on writing, because so many of us are writers, and he's also, I believe, going to make us actually work on writing. Yay. And then also and those are all taking place in Lyndall Phillips across the street. Okay. We're also going to do a pop-up discussion, David Bennett and me and whoever else wants to come, about activism and what it's like to be an activist when you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s, and how we make that work moving forward. Okay, so all of that is that's the housekeeping. I want to give a plug for all of the authors who brought books. Gene Bigler can't be with us today because his sister died. However, he has a brand new published book on modern Panama that is very good. And you can buy it out at the author table. Here is the Voices of the Valley Journeys from the California Writers Club. Who is this from? Oh, it's from Penny.
I've got 3 pieces in there.
Yes.
I brought that anthology to show off my pieces for adults. I have children's books too.
And then there's plenty of children's books. I think many of you have grandchildren or neighbors. There is The Last Lost Warrior by Tom Priest that many of us have known from its birthing pains. Carla Norton sent her books, including Perfect Victim, which was her first New York Times bestseller. And she's donating proceeds of that to my son.
Oh my God.
Carla said to say hello to everybody. She had to be at a meeting in Seattle last weekend.
Yeah.
She said she just could not afford to fly from Florida twice to be
Right.
here and say hello to everyone.
Correct, yes, I actually, Sean, I apologize, but I approached Carla before I approached you about leading the writing seminar. And speaking of John Smith, we have his newest published book of poetry, correct? Yes. Last but not least, I have my newest CD. All right, now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our luncheon speaker. Michael Tubbs is going to tell you his own story, but he grew up in Stockton, and my husband knew him when he was still in high school. We helped him get a scholarship. And in 2016, and no, let's skip back. Before that, Michael ran for city council. I still have my shirt. Michael ran for city council. We were all tremendously excited about the potential that he brought to our city. He was then elected as mayor in 2016 and is our first African-American mayor and the youngest mayor of a big city in the United States. Okay, recognized as one of Politico's top 50, Fortune's 2080, top 40 under 40, Forbes 2018 list of 30 under 30, selected as a Director's Fellow with the 2019 MIT Media Lab, awarded the John F. Kennedy New Frontier Award. That's our guy, Mayor. Tubbs' leadership, paired with an ambitious progressive agenda, has received national recognition, and he'll talk to you about some of those initiatives. But in his first year, he managed to come up with $20 million to launch a program called Stockton Scholars that assures scholarships to kids from Stockton Unified School District, which is considered an inner city school district of about 35,000 students. But it gives scholarships to those kids who are going to move on and graduate and go to college. He brought a program called Advanced Peace. That's a data-driven program that works to reduce gun violence in communities, and is especially important for us because we are mourning the 40th anniversary of the Cleveland school shootings. So it's been a big issue for Stockton for many decades now. We also have, this is the one that's getting all the press, we have a universal basic income project that Michael got subsidies for and got set up and is now funded, and there are people in our city who are now getting a universal basic income stipend and participating in a program to see how that works. Let's see what else we got here. I'm going to let him talk to you about the rest of it, but I had the honor of meeting Bernie Sanders today, because I was one of the people selected to talk to him about Restore the Delta. And to my delight, Michael Tubbs spoke before Bernie Sanders spoke. And it was hard to tell who got the biggest ovation. rise up, speak out, reinvent. Our Mayor of Stockton, Michael Tubbs.
Wendy has never been that nice to me in my life. Get it on camera. Next time she's complaining about it, I'm gonna just play the video. I mean, she likes me, it's all good, it's fine. Welcome back to Stockton for those of you who graduated and haven't come back, and thank you for those of you that have graduated and stayed in the community. Folks like Wendy and Paula and Jean are dear friends and mentors and really help make this community run and work. So again, my name is Michael Tubbs. I have the privilege of being the mayor of Stockton, California, my hometown. I'm born and raised in Stockton. But before I talk about me and how I became mayor, I would say I was very impressed this morning reading about the history of Raymond College, and particularly the student activism and the way you guys led. About the way Burns Tower was taken over to create the CIP program, which actually was my first job after I graduated college as the interim director. Or the way you guys protested on Vietnam, or the way you guys recalled the racist mayor. All those things I think are instructive for where we're at today as a country. And how we need people, old and young, college graduates and not, to really rise up, organize, and speak that we're better than this, and that we deserve a world, a community, and society where everyone's respected and everyone can live with dignity. And that's easier said than done, but that's kind of the task before us here in Stockton and what we've been working on for the past several years. So I decided to run for city council 7 years ago as a college senior at Stanford University after the murder of my cousin, who was a victim of a homicide here at a house party on Halloween 2010. That homicide happened at a really weird time because I was interning in the White House for President Obama. So my job every day was to work with mayors and councils and see what they were doing. I actually hated the job, but that was a little bit boring, but I was exposed to what people were doing at a local level. How mayors in towns of 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 people were really moving the needle and making people's lives better. So I remember calling my mom before the murder and saying, you know what, Mom? I'm gonna go make a lot of money and donate to people in Stockton, donate to the candidates in Stockton, because you're still here, my brother's still here, the rest of the family's still here, and you guys deserve good leadership. Fast forward a couple weeks after the murder of my cousin, I paused, had an inflection point, and realized that it's one thing to be privileged, but it's another thing to put purpose to privilege. It was one thing to feel individually successful. It was one thing to say, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. It's one thing to say, I did it, why can't everyone else do it? But it's another thing to say, since I did it, how do I make sure that everyone else can? That's what drove me. And that's what drove me to run for city council in 2012, at a time where the city had just declared bankruptcy, at a time we had more murders per capita than Chicago, and at a time it felt like everything was falling from underneath us. And I remember when I told my professors I was going to run for city council in Stockton, they said, why? I said, that's my hometown. Why? They're like, that's fine, but there's no win there. There's no way you can be successful there. It's bankrupt, nothing seems to be working. Like, why would you start in such a difficult place? And luckily, I was dumber than I am now, so I didn't listen. And ran for city council, we ended up winning. And I think those 4 years on city council were super instructive. I was able to represent the area I grew up in, the south part of the city, District 6. And I realized then that government can't do everything, but that's not an excuse for government to do nothing. And I also realized that the small things we did matter so much. So when I was on city council, we closed down problem liquor stores. When I was on city council, we opened up health clinics. When I was on city council, we started piloting community policing. And I saw that even as a part-time council member, despite the annoying meetings and despite all the drama that comes with politics, people's lives were being better. Things were moving, albeit not as quickly as I wanted, but it was improving. So then I decided, you know what? City council was cool. I enjoyed it. I thought we would run for a different office, county supervisor. But then for about a year, people kept coming to council meetings saying, Mayor, Councilman Tubbs only cares about Southside. And I would be puzzled every time because I said, well, as a council member, that's my job. Like, who gets penalized for doing their job well? So I'm leaving. But then I listened a little bit deeper and I realized people were saying that same level of energy, vision, insight, and collaboration was needed not just in one part of the city, but throughout the city. And that's when I made the decision to run for mayor. And I say that because it seems when you hear about Forbes and Stanford and Oakland and all this, it's like, oh, it's likely you would be mayor. But fast forward, rewind 19, 20 years ago, it was far from likely. My father was still incarcerated. He's been incarcerated my entire life. My mother, she had me as a teenager. So growing up in Stockton, we grew up in the parts of Stockton that I spent a lot of time focusing on. We grew up in parts of Stockton that have more liquor stores and grocery stores. Grew up in parts of Stockton with more check cashing places and banks. Grew up in parts of Stockton where schools with 90% of kids weren't reading at grade level. Grew up in the parts of Stockton where people heard gunshots every night. Grew up in the part of Stockton where a lot of kids don't even know UOP and this beautiful campus exists. And I think that's what gives some of the passion, some of the stubbornness, and some of the focus on making the city better. So I think now where I sit, again, I'm fine, I'm comfortable, but for far too many people that I represent, for far too many people in our community, they're not. And they're not expecting us or me to do everything for them, but they are at least expecting me to create a foundation upon which to build upon and self-actualize. So it's from that premise we spent the last 3.5 years on this ambitious quest to kind of change some of the structures that give rise to some of the outcomes you see in Stockton. For the past 40 years, for example, Stockton has averaged 46 homicides, which is double the state average. Which is double, it's double the state average. The median household income in Stockton today is $46,000. 44% of African American families and 42% of Latino families live in poverty. And we had the fastest rising rent market in the country of last year. So under those challenges come some of the programs that Winnie was talking about. The first one was realizing that for me personally, education, and for you all as well, was such a great equalizer. It taught me so much, exposed me to the world, found my wife, found my purpose, and I realized that for a lot of folks in Stockton, especially kids, because on the city council I used to teach as well, that the talent and intellect was universal, but the resources and opportunities oftentimes weren't. So I spent the whole first year talking to foundations and philanthropists about what would it look like if we could create a promise to Stockton students. And a simple one that if they do everything right, graduate, fill out the FAFSA, have at least a 2.0, that is guaranteed a scholarship for them to go to a 4-year school, a trade school, or a community college. The message being, we don't care exactly what you do, but you have to do something after you graduate. And it's super important because in the country, Stockton's ranked number 98 of the top 100 metro areas in terms of people like us, people with 4-year degrees or higher. So if all the top metro areas in this country, there's only 2 that have less adults with college degrees. And our rate right now is 17.7%. So with the $20 million gift, we'll be able for the next decade to ensure that every single student who graduates from Stockton Unified is guaranteed a scholarship to a 2-year school, 4-year school, or trade school.
Wow.
But due to legacies of white flight and redlining, Stockton doesn't have 1 school district, we have 4. So now over the next couple of years, the challenge is how do we grow the pot to $100 million so that every single student, whether they go to Lincoln, or McNair, or Bear Creek, or West Branch, has the same opportunity. So that'll be coming soon, hopefully. It's gonna take some support from residents, but I really think if our children are our future, 30% of the city is under the age of 18, then we have to make sure we're making the right investments and investing in a brighter future for the community. So really, really proud of that program. The second program that Wendy mentioned is a program called Advanced Peace. And again, that stems from the fact that for the past 40 years, not the past 3 years or 4 years, like some have you believe, for the past 40 years, Stockton has averaged 46 homicides. And that was even in times when Stockton had less people. So per capita, the number was actually higher. And because of that, and the trauma that gun violence inflicts on communities, on children, on families, on neighborhoods, on social systems and natures, I take it really personal, and I think all options have to be on the table because what we've been doing historically has just not been working. So the first part of our violence reduction strategy in Stockton is a program called Ceasefire. It's a strategy also implemented in the city of Oakland, and the premise is fairly intuitive. It's that in a city of 320,000 people, less than 1% of the population, 174 guys, are likely to be the victims or perpetrators of gun crime. Meaning that in a city of 320,000 people, it's literally 174 people who create the headlines that define who we are as a city. It's 174 people that give us a reputation for violence and crime and being unsafe. It's not the vast majority of people, it's 174 people. And what's interesting about these 174 people is that they're not unknown to us. They've been on probation, on parole, on average 8 times, meaning we have communication with them. They have A lot of them inflict trauma, but also have been traumatized. So a lot of them shoot because they've been shot or they've lost loved ones. Almost all of them grow up in neighborhoods of high poverty and low opportunity. 80% of them have a GED. The rest of a high school diploma. A lot of them are housing insecure and food insecure. And with that, those data points, it paints a picture of folks who think it's appropriate to shoot. Because they really feel like they have nothing to lose. So armed with that data and knowledge, we decided that we would flood these young men with as much attention from cognitive behavioral therapy and case management and resources and tattoo removal as we do with cops in jails. Because we've been doing cops in jails for 40 years. And it's been expensive, it's been costly, but we haven't seen the reductions we deserve. So the premise is how do we couple cops with opportunities and see if that works. So on top of that program, we brought in another program last year called Advanced Peace from the Office of Neighborhood Safety in Richmond, California. And Richmond, California, just 20 years ago, had the highest per capita murder rate in the state. And over the past 8 years, they've seen significant reductions every single year to the point that in the first 4 months of the year last year, the city of Richmond had 0 homicides with very similar demographics, very similar structural issues. But through their Office of Neighborhood Safety, through a program they run called Advanced Peace, they were able to kind of crack the code, if you will. And the program is very similar to the ceasefire program with 2 main differences. The first is that the program is squarely focused on individuals as opposed to groups. So being a little wonky, but our ceasefire strategy is about kind of interrupting group violence, but the Advanced Peace strategy is about the individuals, because oftentimes folks who are shooting may be related, but not formally into a group. In addition to that, they get 7 days a week case management, cognitive behavioral therapy. They can take trips outside the city to see the world, to see how big the world is, and to do things that they can't do in here because they probably wouldn't be safe, like volunteer or meet with victims of crimes and kind of understand the impacts of their actions. And then after 6 months, they're eligible to be part of a fellowship. That's the controversial part. But I tell people all the time, my last job before becoming mayor was I was a fellow at Stanford, meaning I was paid to do work. It's a job, but it's called a fellowship. In the same way, these men after 6 months are eligible to be part of a fellowship where their job is to help kind of keep the peace, to do all the things they should be doing anyway, in an effort to keep our community safe. So last year, we were fortunate to have a 40% reduction in homicides and shootings. This year, we had a little bit of an uptick in the first 4 months, but the last 2 months we've been trending back in that direction. So it looks like we're finally turning, and we'll have to keep focused. But I predict in the next 4 years, you'll see reductions in Stockton like you see in Richmond and Oakland. And then the last program Wendy mentioned is a program called Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, or SEED. And that program comes from the realization that I think the crux of all the things that we're facing in Stockton is poverty. We have 23% of people living in poverty. Now I would argue another 30 to 40% one paycheck away. When there's lack of not niceties, but necessities, you're gonna have all these other issues with literacy and education and entertainment and crime, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of just talking about it, I brought my team together. I said, what is the craziest thing we can do to kind of at least show what's possible, or how do we call into question a structure that makes it so that today in America, 1 in 2 Americans can afford one $400 emergency? Or how do you make it so that folks' rents are rising and their wages aren't, that they're able to not be evicted and add to the homeless system? So then they came back with this idea of basic income. And it was 2017, I had just been elected, and I said, there's no way, we can't do this too soon, maybe second term, I don't know, I don't think it's soon. But then the next month, I happened to be in a conversation at a conference, and the woman came up to me and said, we're looking for a city to pilot a basic income in. And I wasn't entirely truthful. I said, I have a task force established and stuff. And my teams produced white papers and were really seriously exploring. So I came back from the conference and my team was like, well, how you said? I said, wait, if they're going to pay for it, we can do it. So luckily, we were able to get them to pay for it. And for the next 18 months, 130 families throughout the city are getting $500 a month for 18 months. Evaluation from the University of Pennsylvania, University of Tennessee. But what's fascinating is that most of these people are working. Like, I didn't realize this, but in the area about poverty, there's an image that like these people aren't working. almost every recipient is working, or if they're not working, it's because they're like really sick, or they're retired, because they didn't work. The second thing that's fascinating is that these folks are no different than me and you. Like, they spend money without spending money. Sometimes they buy food. Sometimes they pay rent. Sometimes they pay for a light bill. Sometimes the car battery is broken. Sometimes their kids need braces, but they're spending things on normal things because they're normal people like you and me. And then the third thing, and probably the most fascinating, is that so many people are struggling. People with good jobs, people who are small business owners, people who have retired, people who have unexpected healthcare costs. They're like so many people from throughout the city, folks from the south part and the north part, this is the engaged communities. Everyone's finding like, oh wow, this is not enough to replace work or to make me lazy forever, but it is enough to provide a floor so when an emergency happens, it's not cascading and leading me to dire straits. So in October, our first data dashboard will come out, which will show sort of what people are spending money on, kind of who the recipients are demographically, and excited about that. But I'm also very excited because all these three programs have had other mayors and senators and congresspeople like come to Stockton and say, how do I do this in my community? And for me, that makes me really proud because growing up, the narrative was always that Stockton is where you go to find problems. And we haven't solved everything yet, but now it's changing and people are saying, well, how do you find, like, what are they doing in Stockton? At the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I'm always called to speak on the main stage and like, what's going on in Stockton? What should we do? Bagel Work was just in Stockton. I was waiting on the desk for the stop by City Hall and said, I heard you're doing some cool things. What are you doing? How do we do it? Senator Kamala Harris literally wrote a piece of legislation called the LIFT Act, which would give every American making $100K or below $500 a month through a tax credit. Sounds familiar? Based off the demonstration we're running in Stockton today. Mayor Pete just called me 2 days ago, wanting to talk about Stockton and what's going on in basic income. And I think that's exciting. And besides those things, on the wonkier fronts, our general plan previously had ended up being sued by the Attorney General Sierra Club. This time, our general plan we just passed last year is winning awards for having robust community engagement, for having a smart infill strategy, and that's not exciting, like basic income, but for me, in terms of governance, that's super important because that's a land use document that would dictate how our city grows for the next 20, 30 years. We were just bankrupt in 2012, just last year, we were named the second most fiscally healthy city. Governor Gavin Newsom is piloting something called California Cares here in Stockton, where we'll be giving $12 million over the next 6 years to bring 100 AmeriCorps volunteers to Stockton to work on our most serious challenges. Starting in October, so they'll be in our schools doing literacy work, doing mentorship with middle schoolers. What else are they doing? Everything we need to be done, right? and then the governor also put $2 million in his budget this year to begin the process for studying for a CSU in Stockton. And what's powerful about the study is that it's not just a study, the instructions, the implementation documents. So the CSU Chancellor's Office and the governor's finance team has a year to come up with what will it take to do a CSU here in Stockton in terms of how long will it take to get a president, how many classes should be offered, how many students do we need. And I think for me that's super exciting and important because that's something that lasts beyond any 4 or 8 year term. It's something that has a chance to really transform this community. It's the community we all know it could be the community we all fell in love with. And that's not to suggest like a community that is not challenges. I think like every other city in California, housing affordability, and homelessness are public issue number one. In the past 3 years of digging deep and studying, I've realized that number one, there's just a dearth of mental health services. Number two, there's very foundational things we have to build. We need an affordable housing trust. So that if I want to build affordable housing, there's money to make it pencil out. Number two, we have to have a conversation about renter protections. Other things of just cause eviction ordinances, we should at least have that conversation. And then number three, coordination with another governing agency, our friends at the county, is actually more difficult than it sounds. But we're making great strides and we'll get there. And then I think number four, and most importantly, and I don't think it's just a Stockton thing, but really a national thing, you can't hate homelessness unless you love affordable housing. I'm saying you can't hate homelessness unless you love affordable housing, because in going to the 10 cities and going in the freeways, I expected to find people who were like drug addicted or mentally ill. There's some folks like that there for sure, but there's also people who are working. There's also people who are just evicted. There's also people with children who just can't pay $200, $300 in rent. With our rents rising so fast and wages aren't, we have to build more housing fast with all types of housing. Happy to geek out about that as well later. So I'll conclude with I understand there's some freedom riders at Raymond College as alumni.
Yeah.
So 9 years ago, when I was in college, I actually went on a freedom ride reenacted with some of the original freedom riders. So we started in DC and went through every stop they went to. When we get there, they would tell stories. There was one moving scene where the son of the guy who burned the bus in Anniston, Alabama, was there to greet us, and the guy who was on the bus and almost died was the first one off, and they had never met each other, so they embraced and cried. It was a very, very special moment. But there was one conversation in particular that I think motivates the work we do in Stockton, but also just motivates sort of what I would argue is needed in this country today. And his name was Bob Singleton. He was a UCLA student. He was leader of the NAACP. And he said, Michael, we're driving through, we're going from like Jackson to we're somewhere in Mississippi, Alabama, somewhere between there. It was a long bus ride. A lot of dirt. There wasn't a lot of trees or anything to look at. Anyway, he said, Michael, I was arrested on August 4th, 1961. Why is that important? I said, well, you were arrested. If you weren't arrested, you wouldn't be here. Like, I get like things to you have the opportunities I have. Then he looked at me and he said, on that day, Barack Obama was born. And then he said he had no idea that the choices he made as a college student would pave the way so a child born with no opportunity, 50 years later, had the chance to be president. Then he looked at me and he said, what are you prepared to do today so that a child born today, 50 years from now, has every opportunity you have and more? And that's really sort of the organizing frame behind all the crazy ideas, all the work, all the arguments, all the pushing forward. It's really about what are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, a young person born in Stockton is born into a different community. A community that has the same things we love, the natural beauty, the assets, the family atmosphere, the small town feel, the diversity, that also that's coupled with real opportunity for everyone, no matter what neighborhood you live in. What are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, the narrative of Stockton is not one mired in deficits, but in assets, about all the things we love about the city. And then what are we prepared to do today so that 50 years from now, a child born in any neighborhood in Stockton has the chance to go to a fine institution like UOP and then graduate and hopefully stay here in Stockton and contribute, again, like many of the alumni in this room have. So again, thank you. Welcome back to Stockton. I'm happy to answer any questions. And then also happy to eat. So whatever you guys Luckily, I've been work with the government in Stockton to rent out stations. Might be around $4 million. So we don't have exactly what to do with homelessness. And a big part of that will be to kind of work with our shelter to expand capacity for like a navigation center, which is that sort of temporary solution. Yeah. And I think that stuff's important. And my colleagues on council, a lot of people in the community disagree with me, but I don't think the answer to tents is more tents. think the answer to sleeping in cars, giving you a parking lot to sleep in. I think that'd be a very short-term solution. But I think we get distracted on doing that just to appease what we feel when we see homeless folks, instead of like the longer-term solution, which is permanent supportive housing and affordable housing. So I tell myself all the time, we have to walk and chew gum. So let's the temporary stuff, but also make sure we're focused on making sure that as many people as possible that want to be housed can be housed. Because most people who are living on those streets don't want to live on those streets. And those that
Do
do,
you have enough shelter space though?
that's why the navigation are really double the shelter capacity. And then part of the issue, as soon as we get the money, so call the governor, as soon as he gives me a check,
Okay, there was a question over here. Yeah.
I'm interested in your health problem. I think much of us share. We all remember the transition from freedom riding to desegregation decisions and school busing scenario. And it's been brought up again just this week in Marin County before the debates. And I think I probably have a pretty good idea about what most of the people in this room think about that. But I'd be interested in what your view is of that whole legacy of how to deal with the school systems and the housing, and where, I mean, I'm not too happy myself with the way that all turned out, to tell you the truth. And so I'm hoping we're gonna redress it. I wonder if you have any ideas about, because it's a sort of still, seems to be people pointing to it and saying it's a political third rail still. Is it really?
Yeah. Any cameras? No. No, well, all the data tells us that diverse classrooms are better for everybody. Not just for poor kids, not just for minority kids. White kids benefit from being around other people too, particularly as diverse the world's getting and how diverse this country's getting. Number two, I think it's complicated by like Supreme Court decisions like concerned community schools in Seattle, the Louisville case, where they make it very difficult to mandate busing. But the only time we've been able to get desegregation in American schools was to mandate busing. It suggests that, despite what we say, a lot of people don't want their kids to go to school with other kids. So I think that and I didn't know this till the recent debate between Senator Harris and VP Biden, that our schools today are just as segregated, or if not more than they were.
Yeah.
Right, the pre-Brown.
So when you talk about all the positive things, that's something that has not, it's actually moved further to the negative in America.
And that, I mean, long answer. But I think part of it is also the way we fund schools.
Yes.
If schools were funded not based on property, which like the premise of funding, if education is a great equalizer, and they're no fault of their own, some kids are just born with families with less, you would think their schools would have more. But based off our current funding formulas, that inequality they start off with is further exacerbated because those schools are funded less. And people that have more. It defies logic. So I think, if not another conversation to have around busing and kind of forced integration, there has to be a conversation about school funding and how do you make sure if we don't want folks, if we don't want to live in a pluralistic society, how do you make sure that the folks who start off with the least have a fighting chance, at least even. So my position is, I think, again, my master's is in education. The research tells me that diversity in classrooms is important for democracy. It's important for civic engagement. It's also important for brain development and learning. So I think every tool should be on the table in terms of how we get there. Whether that's going to be doable is another thing.
Is, to that point, though, the funding of schooling was undermined by Proposition 13. Is there any meaningful discussion about Proposition 13? Don't get you started.
What are these questions?
Well, and you're being taped.
I think, well, to be frank, I think for any change on Prop 13 to happen, it's going to have to come from rooms like this. I didn't benefit from Prop 13. I think your generation, my parents' generation, y'all did. And I know a lot of folks say you mention Prop 13, it becomes like a holy war. But I know there's a ballot measure going out next year that looks at Prop 13 in terms of commercial and business properties.
Right.
And using that to fund schools. So I think that's a great first step.
Thank you.
Because companies live forever.
Yes, they do. Until they go bankrupt.
We know it when we support it. My
question's really concrete. I got to know Stockton best after I graduated from Raymond and after I'd gone to Vietnam, when I drove a cab here. And I discovered some weird things because I was picking people up in Sierra Vista, I was picking them up in the far north, and I was running all over town. One of the things that I noticed, and I thought about it when you said more liquor stores and grocery stores, if you visited a Safeway on the south side of town, and you visited a Safeway in Lincoln, the quality of produce of the south side was worse, and it cost more. And that's a corporate policy that made that possible. Do you have anything to try and address that so at least access to food is on something like an equal basis?
Yeah, what's heartbreaking is there's not a Safeway out there. What's heartbreaking today. So Gene probably has a better answer in the work he's doing with Puentes to kind of bring fresh fruits into underserved communities in a way that's cost efficient. On the policy side, I think a lot of liquor store people don't like me because every time they come for a vote for me, it's a no. Because we just have too many, so we're concentrated. We never get less until we stop saying yes to it. No. And then also, I mentioned earlier some of the work we did to close the liquor store. And we tried to bring in the grocery store in. But grocery stores, it's weird. You know, I got in an argument with one of my friends because they base their decisions on how many college degrees are on the rooftops. And it's like, people without college degrees are like fruit. Like I don't understand the premise, but that's literally how they make their decisions. They look at the amount of rooftops in the census tract with college degrees. I guess the margins or something. But with that being said, been in a lot of conversations with Walter Robb over the past 3 years. What can we do if not a full-fledged grocery store? Can we do a hybrid? Can we help? And we've also been working with a foundation called the California Endowment around sort of putting fresh produce in some of these corner stores, and also teaching the owners how to make sure that the food is always fresh. And it's funny because 7 years ago, when my then girlfriend, now wife, came to visit me, she asked me a question I'll never forget. She said, "Where can I get an apple?" And I looked. I said, "Well, Trader Joe's is about 20 minutes away." She said, "Wait." She said, "No, like seriously, where can I get an apple?" I was like, "That's a good." No, I've never had to ponder that question. And I think Michelle's on eat all the apples. But the wider point was that was the first time I realized that what seemed normal to me was actually really abnormal. And that, there's a food store that's like 15 minutes away, there's a Trader Joe's 20 minutes away, and there was a Rancho San Miguel like 12 minutes away. That's a long way to go for an apple, particularly for a lot of folks who don't have cars. So no good answers yet. A lot of good conversations with people, but really trying to figure out how to do it. Oh, and there's a interesting project we're doing with the school district called the Edible Schoolyards Project. It's with Alice Waters. So she and Puentes are working to create food distribution systems directly to kids to take home to their families. So that, I'm getting an update in 2 weeks, and I think by next year it'll be full-fledged and up and running.
Do you also teach people how to use fresh produce? Because there are people who've never seen it.
Yeah, I can't cook, so I'm not a cook. Seriously, I'm the worst cook you've ever came and cut.
Change that.
I got one final question and then we need to have some lunch.
Oh, just let me do 2 more. How do you do 2 more?
You can have 2 more. Go ahead.
Michael, you're aware, I'm sure, of the fact that Stockton is the only city in the United States that's got an integration order from the Supreme Court that came from the bottom up to the top. Every other one has come from the top down. And busing was an issue then, as it is now. And busing has always been a phony issue in terms of things. In the Deep South, the fact is that many white children were bused miles to avoid going to school with African American kids. I rode a bus, in the mornings to go to high school, and in the evening we came the opposite way and rode an hour, and that was the way that country kids got to town. Busing was the only way that we could possibly do integration in the schools in this nation, and people who argued against busing were simply wrong. Biden argued against busing, and he was wrong. And we Stockton because people were opposed to busing. And being opposed to busing was being opposed to integration. That's a simple fact.
You said it. One more question.
I agree.
There was one over here, James.
I would like to propose an experiment, because when we talk about social issues, we often say.
Talk louder, some of us over here are deaf.
I want to propose an experiment, because when we talk about social issues and spending money, people say, oh, that's too much money to spend. And we talk as if money disappears as soon as it's spent on something. And so I would like to spend right now $30. And my proposal is that I'm going to pass these around. And when you get it, people don't keep the money when they get it, especially if they're poor. They spend it. They pass it on. So as the money comes around to you, pass it on, but keep track of how much money has come through your hand. And the next time somebody says that's too much money to spend, think about the multiplying effect.
I'm gonna use that.
So, each of us got.
There's your Raymond education.
Yes, sir.
Mike Wagner. Mike Wagner. Okay, economics.
Yes, he said it's the city have credit. Yes, our bond ratings.
We put the grocery store.
Speak up, Gary.
Gary, we can't hear. We put the grocery store in inner city using the city's credit, no cost to anybody.
Which city?
Houston.
Houston?
Of all places, you don't know what would happen to happen.
Well, I'm going to look into it. I can
And it's a
remember that.
private deal.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you for that.
Cameron's making notes over here. Charlie's got a question, and then we're gonna eat.
We've been talking about palliative measures for the most part today. Palliative measures we've been talking about. Are you guys have a vision for what kind of industry is gonna come in here and replace all the stuff, or did I miss that?
No, I just didn't talk about it. So,
I mean, you're not gonna get a Silicon Valley here probably.
well, I don't think we'll get Silicon Valley, but we've been in talks with Y Combinator and other folks about some of the startups. Coming to Stockton, located in our downtown. We have actually a coding academy that's opening in our downtown this week, so we're hoping to make Stockton, if not an epicenter, one of the focal points for sort of for technology that the industry's already good at, so logistics, transportation, agriculture, et cetera. Additionally, we've been positioning ourselves, particularly with the legalization of cannabis, we have distribution and manufacturing and testing them. Understand that those jobs are good jobs, good degrees, and they kind of build on what assets we already have. We've also been working with this university on two sort of measures, one around kind of skills gap and addressing sort of what's the disconnect between the skills residents have and the skills residents need to really attract employers, number one. And then number two, in 2 weeks, we're having a roundtable on artificial intelligence and figuring out sort of what does artificial intelligence mean for Stockton and how we position ourselves to not be victims, but actually kind of harness some of that for the community's good. In addition, we've been working with our port and figuring out how we leverage the port and their intermodal transit with the airport, which now has direct flights to LAX starting in a couple weeks to bring jobs there. Last year we brought in a data center called Nautilus, which is a data center that's cooled by water, so it's going to be at the port. We're hoping that'll be catalytic for folks and companies that need data centers. Then we're also in conversations with a group called Stockton Fiber about installing fiber optic networks. Starting in our downtown, but throughout the city, to really bring that connectivity. And then, other than that, standard economic development stuff, so a lot of stuff around.
But there's no single initiative that you guys are trying to bring in.
No. I mean, I think the cannabis and the tech stuff, but then we also have done a lot of work, like Amazon, for example, in our industrial areas. There's about 2,500 jobs in the last 2 years. Prologis is thinking about coming. So our foundational sort of more nuts and bolts economic development strategies around kind of the industrial area and our industrial park.
Yeah.
Our longer term play is really bringing that connectivity and using our proximity to Silicon Valley with also our price point being $100 per square foot less than what you get in downtown San Francisco to allow some semblance of startups or companies that need more space to operate to come.